Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, December 22nd. This is Africa 54.
How COVID is dashing the hopes of Zimbabweans' Christmas homecoming. We'll have a report. U.S. President Joe Biden urges COVID vaccinations and offers free tests amid the Omicron variant surge. And campaigners warn that Kenya is condemning women to death by unsafe abortion.
A South African study offered a pre-Christmas update about the severity of Omicron on Wednesday as the fast-spreading coronavirus variant forces countries worldwide to impose new restrictions. Clara Frank has more.
A South African study offered some pre-holiday hope about the severity of Omicron Wednesday. The study by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases and major universities, which has not been peer-reviewed, compared South African Omicron data from October and November with data about Delta between April and November. The authors found that the risk of hospital admission was roughly 80% lower for those with Omicron, and that for those in hospital, the risk of severe disease was roughly 30% lower. Still, the authors cautioned against jumping to conclusions. A study by Imperial College London released last week found no sign that Omicron was milder. Meantime, COVID cases appear to have peaked in South Africa's Gauteng province, one of the first places in the world where the variant surfaced. The NICD said that there had been a leveling off in 3 other provinces as well, though cases were still increasing elsewhere. It also cautioned that some of the lower case numbers could be due to lower levels of testing during the holiday period. While hospitalization rates in the country have risen, they have so far remained far below the level seen during previous waves of the pandemic. Clara Frank, Washington.
Meanwhile, South African medical experts say a drop in coronavirus cases indicates the country has passed the peak of a 4th wave of infections driven by the Omicron variant. Health officials say the Omicron variant spreads faster than previous variants, but has hospitalized far fewer patients. The number of new coronavirus cases in South Africa's most populous province, Gauteng, is declining. Health officials say while some areas of the country are still seeing increases, most provinces are leveling off. More than 15,000 positive cases were reported Tuesday nationwide, a marked decline from the 26,000 daily cases seen a week ago. As Christmas Day nears, scores of Zimbabwean travelers would normally be packed at bus stations, rushing to get home from neighboring South Africa to see their loved ones. However, bus drivers are seeing far fewer people than expected. Emma McCarthy explains.
Just days before Christmas, Zimbabwean bus stations would normally be packed with travellers rushing to get home from neighbouring South Africa. But this year, it's much quieter.
Our business is very low. Customers, the passengers are not going back to Zim. And about the COVID-19, you know, they are afraid for quarantine and what is talking at the borders.
Bus drivers had been hoping for a bumper festive season to help their businesses recover after borders were shut for most of last year. However, the emergence of the Omicron variant prompted Zimbabwe to announce mandatory 10-day quarantine for arrivals from South Africa in government-approved facilities at their own expense. Albert Mwere is determined to travel despite the financial pressures.
You can't stay maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years without seeing your parents. It was difficulties, and also you got children who are there. You see, now we see we must see them, and they must see us. You see, so that's why we decided to travel now.
However, for bus drivers like Augustin Chibeya, this year's Christmas season is looking grim. His firm would normally send 4 buses per day with up to 60 passengers during December. Now it sends one, sometimes with as few as 5 people on board.
Yeah, since COVID started, we don't have a business. You look as you see, it's very quiet. Even the booth, I have look no business. This quarantine, this is COVID killing our business.
Emma McCarthy of Reuters filed that report. U.S. President Joe Biden is urging people to not panic as he announced an updated 3-pronged plan to fight unexpected rise in COVID-19 cases after the emergence of the highly transmissible Omicron variant. He also on Tuesday pleaded with the millions of unvaccinated Americans to get their shots. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
President Joe Biden said Tuesday he has 3 tools to fight the rapid spread of COVID-19's formidable Omicron variant. The administration will increase support for hospitals, make 500 million free tests available to Americans, and expand vaccine access. He also encouraged the vaccinated to not panic.
If you're not fully vaccinated, you have good reason to be concerned. You're at a high risk of getting sick. And if you get sick, you're likely to spread it to others, including friends and family. The unvaccinated have a significantly higher risk of ending up in a hospital or even dying. Almost everyone who has died from COVID-19 in the past many months has been unvaccinated. Unvaccinated. But if you're among the majority of Americans who are fully vaccinated, and especially if you've gotten the booster shot, that 3rd shot, you have much less reason to worry.
Biden acknowledged that persuading the holdouts, about 40% of Americans are completely unvaccinated, is an enduring challenge for his administration.
Look, the unvaccinated are responsible for their own choices. But those choices have been fueled by dangerous misinformation on cable TV and social media. You know, these companies and personalities are making money by peddling lies and allowing misinformation that can kill their own customers and their own supporters. It's wrong. It's immoral. I call on the purveyors of these lies and misinformation to stop it. Stop it now.
In recent days, an unlikely pro-vaccine ally has emerged, former President Donald Trump. He recently admitted he had received a booster shot and was booed for it by some of his followers.
It may be one of the few things he and I agree on. People with booster shots are highly protected. Join them. Join us.
But critics say this push for boosters is unjust when many around the world have yet to get a single shot. On Tuesday, the One Campaign, a health policy advocacy organization, warned that there is no way to hit the target of vaccinating 40% of the world's population by the end of the year, and that it could take more than a decade for low-income countries to match the vaccination levels of high-income countries.
We are absolutely not winning the global war against the pandemic, as evidenced by Omicron. But of course, Delta showed us that, and the original virus showed us that. The lack of global leadership, the lack of coordinated leadership among countries, the me-first reaction by every, government leader during the first 2 years of this pandemic has meant that it has continued on longer at the cost of more lives and more livelihoods. It's very clear what needs to happen. A national-only strategy will not work.
Critics also decry wealthy nations for hoarding essential supplies. On Tuesday, Biden defended the U.S. decision to stockpile protective equipment and ventilators as necessary to prepare for a run on hospitals. This week, as Americans stare down this threat, Biden sought to put a balm on his weary nation.
I know you're tired. I really mean this, and I know you're frustrated. We all want this to be over, but we're still in it. And this is a critical moment. We also have more tools than we've ever had before. We're ready. We'll get through this.
Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
Sudan Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok has told a group of national, political and intellectual figures that he intends to resign as early as Wednesday. 2 sources close to Hamdok told Reuters on Tuesday. Hamdok was reinstated on November 21st following a coup a month earlier that saw the military take power and end transitional partnership with political parties. While several political forces participated in drafting the agreement, according to the sources, it has faced widespread criticism from parties and the general public. Last Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people marched on the presidential palace rejecting both military rule and Hamdok's decision to return. At least 47 people have died in crackdowns on protests against the military rule. A Libyan parliamentary committee says it will be impossible to hold a presidential election on Friday. The committee chairman gave his assessment in a letter to the head of parliament, saying it came after consulting technical, judicial and security reports. The chairman did not specify a new date for the election to take place. Numerous disputes involved in the process had raised expectations that the long-awaited vote would be delayed. Libya is operating under an interim government 10 years after the ouster of longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi. Rival factions in the eastern and western part of the country have observed a ceasefire for the past year under a UN-backed peace process. In a year-end press briefing, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken highlighted renewed U.S. alliances abroad while also addressing foreign policy challenges like Russia's actions near Ukraine and Afghanistan's growing humanitarian crisis. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has more.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken faced reporters to look back and forward after a momentous, sometimes tumultuous year. Many questions focused on the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russian-backed separatists and fears of a new Russian invasion with a massive buildup of Russian troops along the two countries' common border. Blinken again called on Moscow to de-escalate the situation and pull its troops back. He said the U.S. is ready to hold talks with Moscow and all the stakeholders in the region, likely in January.
We're engaged in diplomacy and deterrence at the same time. These two things go hand in hand. As you know, just to step back for a second, President Biden, when he first met with President Putin in Geneva some months ago, and you were there, said to President Putin that our strong preference is for a more predictable and stable relationship between Russia and the United States. But if Russia continues to engage in reckless or aggressive actions, we will respond, and we'll respond strongly.
Blinken was also asked if he had regrets about the hasty and chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan after the Taliban took power in Kabul in August. He said there will be plenty of time to reflect, but that President Joe Biden made good on his promise to end the 20-year U.S. war in Afghanistan.
We knew this would be challenging. It was. And there are lessons from the evacuation and relocation that we're learning for the future. But this is also the first time in 20 years that no U.S. troops are spending the holidays in Afghanistan, and we're not sending a third generation of American soldiers to fight and die there.
Blinken said the U.S. is fully aware of the suffering of the Afghan people and is working intensely with allies to get liquidity back into the Afghan economy and money into the pockets of the Afghan people, and not in the hands of the Taliban rulers. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Ugandan-based faith-driven organization is helping drive economic growth by supporting small and medium enterprises. We'll have a report, but first, Haiti Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Join me on the next Straight Talk Africa as we continue our review of the news from Africa in 2021. We'll bring you the best of our interviews from this year, from a moment of African camaraderie at the Tokyo Olympics, men and mental health, and what Africa's young people really want. We'll look back at unfiltered moments and conversations with some of our guests in 2021. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Women in Kenya are still in danger of unsafe abortions, despite the East African country's revised law that allows for termination of pregnancies if the health of the mother and baby are at risk. The lack of clarity on this law is driving women and girls to unsafe underground abortions that continue to claim lives. Brenda Mulinya reports from Nairobi.
Lillian, not her real name, nearly lost her life 3 years ago trying to terminate a pregnancy she wasn't ready for after the sudden death of her husband. The now 32-year-old says with 4 children and no husband, it was not practical for her to have another baby. With no clear framework and guidelines for accessing this right in place in Kenya, she sought the only other way she could to terminate a pregnancy.
My friend first told me to consume some very bitter local leaves that would help me get the abortion. That did not work. Another friend then advised me to take a packet of family planning pills mixed with some more bitter herbs. I started bleeding. I was alone in the house with no one to help me.
She was denied post-abortion care in public hospitals and had to rely on a medical health caregiver until she recovered, but at a cost. Lillian represents hundreds of women and girls in Kenya who seek abortion services at great risks to their lives. Victoria Atieno, a reproductive health rights community worker, says cases like Lillian's are many in these informal settlement areas. She says those who procure backroom abortions are often ostracized from the community. For some, the consequences have been fatal.
Stigmatization is high in these parts of the city, leading to cases of suicide because girls don't want people to talk about them procuring abortions. They feel like they are not free to associate with other girls who are deemed cleaner than them.
A non-governmental organization, Center for Reproductive Health, says the lack of proper government guidelines to actualize freedoms granted in the Kenyan Constitution has led to an increase in cases of unsafe abortions and the resultant deaths and lifelong injuries for girls and women.
The Constitution outlines emergency, life, health, and, if allowed by any other law. The unfortunate situation in this country is that despite the constitutional protection, what we have seen historically, including post the passing of this constitution, many women and girls who ordinarily qualify to access abortion within the protection of the law, opting to go to quacks.
The Kenyan government remains tight-lipped on the place of the constitutionally mandated safe abortions under limited circumstances. A high court in 2019 asked the Ministry of Health to operationalize the standards and guidelines that would enable those seeking these services access to the same in public institutions. Eseli Simiyu, a doctor and a member of the Kenyan Parliament, says the silence from the Ministry of Health is not the solution to stopping the backdoor abortions that continue to account for 17% of all maternal deaths in the country. He says the authorities must act now by making sure the law is clear.
Define health, because if you define health as mental well-being, not just the absence of disease, but mental well-being, then the health is threatened if somebody is carrying an unwanted pregnancy.
Abortion in Kenya remains illegal unless the life of the mother is in danger, with highly punitive measures if one is caught procuring or administering it. The MP wants the government to legalize it.
I think we must face it and find a way. And to me, the only way I can see it is legalize it and control it. By well-trained personnel in properly registered and well-equipped centers. That is the only solution.
While the situation remains as it is, women like Vivian continue to rescue girls and women on the brink of life-changing injuries and even death from unsafe abortions in Kenya. Brenda Mulinya for VOA News, Nairobi.
In our tech news, small and medium African enterprises, also known as SMEs, provide an estimated 80% of jobs across the continent, representing an essential driver of economic growth. For these businesses to grow and create more jobs, they need capital. but only a small number have access to a bank loan or line of credit. In Uganda, Hiinga, a Kampala-based Christian faith-driven impact investing fund, is changing that narrative by investing directly in small and medium enterprises. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Andy Christian Agaba, the founder and chief executive officer of Hiinga.
Andy Agaba, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul.
You started a company that is changing lives. It's having a huge impact on a lot of people in the area of financing. Maybe let's start there.
Hiinga started about almost 10 years ago. We bootstrapped it, typical startup story. And I'm quite amazed today what we've been able to achieve over the last so many years. We almost failed several years as well. But the idea is pretty simple. It's like there is a huge credit gap for small and medium enterprises, and we know that those SMEs are really the economic engine, for growth, for employment. And so we focused on that. We funded hundreds of ventures over the last so many years. Some have done very well, others have done not so great, but the biggest thing that that's changing lives. Jobs are created, and the economy grows. And so we are excited about what we're seeing in the market, at least pre-COVID.
What led you to come up with this venture where you are trying to help other companies, small companies that are doing amazing work?
The origin story here begins with my childhood. I was raised by a single mom. My father was killed 2 weeks before I was born, and what that did, deprived us of a provider, and actually set us up into real poverty. But my mom was not one of those people to wallow into her misfortune, but to really try to figure out how to make ends meet. And so growing up, I saw her starting little businesses, micro businesses. You've seen little tea shops by the roadside and stuff like that. And we were involved. And so I would say that my education, my preparation, my training came through there. And so I started dreaming as really very, very young. I was like, man, I want to be involved into that. Access to capital, mentoring entrepreneurs, and creating opportunity in that sense. So, and here we are. So the people that we work with, the hundreds of entrepreneurs that we funded, I think they are living my dream because they're creating every day opportunity for others, and I think that's a life worth living.
How does Hiinga get funding to fund these small enterprises in Uganda?
I think we have 3 channels there. The first one is revenue. We actually make revenue, so we do make profit. I love profit. Profit is not a dirty word. It's a great word. So we generate enough revenue that we are able to recycle that capital. But we also borrow money that we then leverage to these businesses. But we also tap into philanthropic funds. And so I've been fortunate to make some substantial connections, and we tell the story, and somehow we're able to glean some.
You talked about your company funding hundreds of small companies. Obviously, that has created a lot of jobs in a lot of areas. Can you maybe speak to that?
We are very sector agnostic in how we make our funding decisions. So we've funded our businesses across any sectors. Think about agribusiness, processors, light manufacturing, healthcare. I mean, I think you've spoken to some of our healthcare partners, and schools. We probably have 60 plus different schools that we have funded are in this country billions of shillings, and now obviously with the learners being trapped at home that are not able to to go to school. But those are actual ventures, businesses that are changing lives and creating impact to many learners. We funded technology and things. So we are, if an entrepreneur is great, if they're serious, if they have the discipline and they're doing something great, and we actually have the money or we can afford to participate in what they're doing, we're going to do it.
Thank you so much for your time, Andy.
Oh, thank you, sir, for the opportunity for us to be on your show and tell our story. Thank you.
That was Africa 54 tech correspondent Paul Diho speaking to Andy Christian Agaba, the founder and chief executive officer of Hinga. Scientists at a California company are using biotechnology to create an eco-friendly dye as an alternative to the toxic dyes typically used in the production of denim. VOA's Julie Tabo explains.
Despite its classic look, the blue dye used to manufacture denim can be hard on the environment and potentially toxic to workers, some researchers say. Scientists at a company in Berkeley, California, have come up with what they say is an eco-friendlier dye, inspired by Mother Nature. They study enzymes that plants use to produce color and program microbes in their lab to mimic that process. The Japanese indigo plant, for example, makes the blue dye molecule in its leaves.
So we've taken the genetic information from the plant and used it to inform and program our microbes. And so here we have microbes growing on a plate where they're producing indigo in the same way that the dye plant would make indigo.
The researchers grow the microbes in a liquid culture where they replicate and divide to produce the indigo color.
So here we begin the process of developing out how to best grow our microbes so it's producing the largest amount of dye.
The fabric is soaked in the dye bath and placed on a fabric pattern.
And here's the final dyed fabric. This is one of the first hue indigo dyed lab coats that we made.
With the advancements in bioengineering and biotechnology, there really is an opportunity to clean up and change these traditional industries for good.
While Hue started its program with indigo for denim, the company plans to create more color options and expand to other industries.
So whether that be for the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, or the paint on our walls, color is everywhere, and Hue is creating it in a better way, powered by biotechnology.
Hue plans to have its eco-friendly products available to consumers within the next few years. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.